Ezra Whitmore didn't believe in miracles anymore. Life had taught him better. After losing his wife to fever and watching too many neighbors buried under the hard desert dirt, Ezra figured the world was mostly silence, dust, and hard choices. But that evening, as the dying sun painted the mesa in burning amber, something unexpected stirred at the edge of his land. He spotted it from the porch, just a lump by the well, slumped low in the red earth. At first glance, it looked like an animal, maybe a coyote curled in pain. But Ezra's instincts told him different. He grabbed his rifle, worn smooth from years of use, and started walking, slow but sure. His boots pressed deep into the dust, every step kicking up ghosts of memories he tried hard not to recall. As he got closer, the truth hit him like a gut punch. It was a girl, not more than 16, if that. Her skin, bronze like the desert itself, was pale from blood loss. Her long black hair stuck to her face in matted clumps, caked with dirt and dried blood. Her clothes, Apache-made, were torn, stained with sweat, mud, and what looked like days of suffering. And she was barely breathing. Ezra dropped to his knees, rifle set aside, hands moving on instinct. He pressed his fingers to the side of her neck. A faint pulse flickered beneath her skin, fragile, distant, like the beat of wings against the edge of death. She was alive, but just barely. His heart thudded, not with fear, but with something he hadn't felt in years: urgency, compassion, humanity. The wars between settlers and Apache had left this land poisoned with suspicion. A white man finding an Apache girl on his land, injured, vulnerable, could mean bloodshed, and not just his own. It didn't matter what side you were on anymore. Everyone was afraid, and fear turned men into monsters. But looking at her, so broken, so young, Ezra felt something crack open inside him. Her eyes fluttered open as he touched her shoulder. Just a moment, just a flicker. But in that moment he saw it: fear, yes, but also something else. A spark. Hope. A will to live. Her lips moved, forming sounds in a language he couldn't understand. But the message was clear. Please. He didn't hesitate. Ezra slid his arms beneath her, careful not to jar the wounds too much. She was impossibly light, like her body had already started to let go. Her head fell against his chest as he carried her back toward the cabin, breath shallow and almost silent. He checked her pulse twice more on the way, terrified it might vanish between heartbeats. His cabin was modest. One room, one fireplace. One man's quiet grief pressed into every wooden beam. He hadn't shared it with anyone since his wife died 5 years back, and it had become a place of survival, not comfort. He laid the girl on his bed, and lit the oil lamp. Shadows danced across the walls like spirits watching from some other life. Ezra moved quickly, gathering what supplies he had. A bucket of well water, clean cloth, a half-empty bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for toothaches or gunshot wounds, whichever came first. She stirred as he worked, moaning softly. He cleaned the blood from her arms, wincing at the sight of deep, deliberate cuts, jagged, methodical. This wasn't some accident in the wild. Someone had done this. Someone had meant to hurt her. Ezra felt a sickness rise in his gut. Not just disgust, but anger. Who could do this to a child? She slipped in and out of consciousness, muttering in Apache, her words fractured like glass. Ezra, not knowing what else to do, spoke gently in return. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you here." But even as he said it, he knew it might be a lie. He didn't know who she was, or who was looking for her. In this land, taking in a wounded Apache girl could be taken as a declaration of war. Still, he sat beside her through the night, his rifle across his lap, watching the dark window. Every creak of wood or shift in wind set his nerves on edge. But he didn't move. He watched. He waited. And he wondered what dawn would bring. The first light of morning seeped through the cabin window like a warning. Ezra hadn't slept. He sat by the girl's side all night, eyes trained on the window, ears straining for movement beyond the desert wind. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the floorboards. Outside, the world was still, but not quiet. No, not quiet. The desert had its own voice. And this morning, it whispered of danger. Then came the sound. At first, it was distant, soft thuds, like thunder echoing off canyon walls. Hooves, dozens of them, maybe more. Ezra stood, slow and deliberate. He moved to the window, careful not to wake the girl. But she stirred anyway, groaning as her body remembered the pain. He looked out and froze. Horses emerged through the misty dawn, their silhouettes cutting black shapes against the rising sun. Riders, Apache warriors, dark, silent, and many, at least a dozen, and more kept appearing, slipping out from behind rocks, rising from dry creek beds, materializing like ghosts from the folds of the land. They weren't charging. They weren't shouting. They were surrounding him. Ezra counted 15, 20, 25. By the time the sun crested the hills, more than 50 had taken position in a calculated circle around his property. Behind every boulder, at the top of every ridge, in every patch of cover, a warrior waited. They weren't here by accident. Behind him, the girl made a soft, wounded sound as she sat up. Ezra turned to her. Her eyes were wide, alert despite the pain. She pushed herself upright, winced, then managed to steady herself on her elbows. When she saw his face, tense, pale, she spoke in Apache, words tumbling fast and sharp. "I don't understand," Ezra said softly, "but I think you need to see this." He helped her up. She leaned into him, her legs shaky. Together they walked to the window. When she saw the warriors, her breath caught in her throat. She pressed a hand to the glass, speaking rapidly in Apache. Too fast, too desperate for him to make sense of it. Then, her voice steadied. She pointed to herself. "Ayanna," she said. Then she pointed out the window, to a lone rider on the ridge, taller than the rest, with a towering headdress of feathers and leather. His presence radiated command. "Father," she whispered. Ezra's heart sank. She wasn't just any girl. She was the daughter of a chief. And now the chief had come to retrieve her with an army. Ayanna leaned against the windowsill, whispering fiercely, trying to make him understand. Her voice trembled not from fear of death, but from fear of what she'd just escaped. Her eyes locked onto his with urgency. Outside, the warriors moved again. More riders. More eyes. Ezra stopped counting after 70. The ground seemed to hum beneath his feet. Then came a new sound. Drums. Low, deep, rhythmic, like a heartbeat made of thunder. Ezra's blood went cold. Ayanna suddenly gripped his sleeve, fingers tightening. She pointed at the chief. Her lips formed a single word. "Please." A moment later, the drums stopped. Total silence fell. Heavy. Final. Then one of the warriors, tall, broad-shouldered, rode forward alone. He stopped just beyond rifle range, raised his hand, and called out in thick but clear English. "White man, you have something that belongs to us." Ezra didn't move. Ayanna stood frozen beside him, her eyes locked on the man. "Send out the girl," the warrior continued. "Now. Maybe then you live to see another day." Ayanna shook her head violently, tears pooling in her eyes. She clutched Ezra's arm tighter. Her whole body trembled, not with weakness, but terror. Ezra looked down at her. "What did they do to you?" he asked. She said nothing. But then, slowly, she pulled back the torn sleeve of her dress and revealed what he had missed the night before. Scars. Not just cuts. Not random. Patterns. Marks made on purpose. Ezra felt rage boil in his chest. They'd hurt her, tortured her, marked her like property. The warrior outside called again. "1 minute, white man, or we come take her, and leave your bones for the buzzards." Ezra moved to his gun cabinet. He opened it, pulled out his second rifle, a box of ammunition. If they were coming, he wouldn't die with empty hands. He loaded the weapon, checked the sights. It wouldn't be enough. 2 rifles against an entire war party. It was suicide. Ayanna watched him prepare. Then, without a word, she limped to the cabinet, picked up a small pistol from the shelf. She checked the chamber like someone who'd handled guns before. Ezra raised his eyebrows. She met his gaze. "Fight!" she said in broken English. "Fight too." The words hit him like a hammer. This girl, beaten and broken, had more courage than most men he'd known. Outside, the warrior raised his voice again. "Time is up, white man. This is your last chance." But then, just as Ezra expected the first shot to ring out, another rider appeared on the ridge. Younger, leaner, dressed with distinction. He galloped forward, toward the speaker. They began to argue in Apache. Loud, heated, furious. Anna froze. Her eyes went wide. She whispered something. A name. Then hope bloomed in her face. The young rider broke away and approached the cabin, closer than any had dared. He shouted, "Sister, are you alive? Are you hurt?" Ayana pressed her hand to the glass and answered in a broken cry, full of pain and longing. Ezra didn't understand the words. But he didn't need to. Family had come. And now everything was about to change. The young warrior's voice still echoed across the canyon when Ezra opened the cabin door. He stepped outside slowly, his rifle cradled in his arms but pointed low. Ready, but not threatening. Ayana was just behind him, limping forward with quiet resolve, the small pistol still in her hand. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with something unshakable. She was not hiding anymore. The desert held its breath. Hundreds of Apache warriors watched from the ridges and rocks, their weapons at the ready. One twitch, one wrong word, and the entire scene could collapse into bloodshed. But no one moved. And then the chief rode forward. He descended from the ridge like a storm rolling down a mountain, his black horse stepping with power and precision. The man was imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, his long hair streaked with silver and threaded with bone and feather. His face was weathered, marked by age and war, but it was his eyes that held Ezra still. They weren't cruel, but they were sharp. They saw everything. He stopped 10 feet from the cabin. "I am Nal Nish," he said, his English heavily accented but forceful. "War chief of the Chiricahua Apache." His voice was calm, low like thunder before it breaks. "The girl is my daughter, blood of my blood. You will return her to me now." Ezra swallowed hard. The chief wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. This was a man who didn't ask twice. Around them, the warriors waited for his signal, like arrows already drawn, just waiting for the wind to shift. Ayana stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. She called out in Apache, desperate and rapid, pointing to Ezra, then to the scars on her arms, then to the cabin behind them. Her tone wasn't frightened, it was pleading, emotional. She said his name more than once. The chief didn't react at first. He just listened, stone-faced, unmoving. When she finished, the silence returned like a blanket. Then the chief spoke again. But this time his eyes didn't leave Ezra's. She says, "You saved her life." She says, "You asked for nothing." Ezra nodded. "That's right." She says, "You gave her your bed. You slept in a chair. You spoke kind to her, even though she could not understand." Ezra took a breath. Any man would have done the same. The chief's jaw tightened. No, many men would not. Many white men would have. He paused, eyes darkening. Seen opportunity, not obligation. That truth hung in the air like a blade. Ezra said nothing. There was no defense to offer, no explanation. Just the weight of what could have happened, had he not chosen otherwise. The chief's face softened, barely. "You did not," he said.
"You chose honor."
Then came words Ezra didn't expect. "This creates obligation." The war chief turned to his warriors and barked a string of orders in Apache. A murmur rippled through the ranks. Some nodded. Others frowned. Then, in English, "You are under my protection now. Any harm that comes to you will be treated as harm to my family." Ezra's legs almost gave out. But even in that breath of relief, he noticed something else. Not every warrior looked pleased. Some still glared at him with hate, distrust burning in their eyes. They didn't want peace. They wanted justice or revenge. And then one of them broke ranks. A younger warrior spurred his horse forward, eyes locked on Ezra with raw fury. He shouted in Apache, fast and angry, pointing to Ayanna, then to Ezra. The chief answered sharply, but the younger man didn't back down. Ayanna turned to Ezra, her face suddenly full of worry. "Takakota," she whispered. "War leader under father. He says, white man brings curse." The two warriors argued, tension growing by the second. Other warriors began to shift, taking sides with subtle movements of their horses. A fracture was opening in the circle, and Ezra stood right in the middle of it. The chief raised his hand. The voices silenced. "He believes," the chief said, "that your kindness is weakness, that others will follow you, that settlers will come behind your back with guns and greed." Ezra didn't flinch. "And what do you believe?" Before the chief could answer, Takakota turned his fury directly on Ezra. "You lie!" he shouted in broken English. "White men always lie. Today you help. Tomorrow you bring soldiers. Better to kill you now." Ezra's grip tightened on his rifle, but he didn't raise it. "I give you my word," he said calmly. "I won't tell anyone about this. Not a soul." Takakota spat into the dust. "White man's word. Worth nothing." Then Ayanna did something no one expected. She stepped in front of Ezra. She walked up to Takakota's horse, speaking to him in Apache, low and firm. Ezra didn't understand the words, but he didn't have to. Her voice held fire, pain, truth, and slowly, Takakota listened. His shoulders tensed, then sagged. His eyes moved to Ezra, suspicious still, but no longer full of fury. "She tells him," the chief translated softly, "what the others did to her. She tells him you could have done the same, but you did not." Takakota dismounted, walked to Ezra, and stood just feet away. Ezra braced himself. The warrior studied him, really studied. Then, in halting English, "You have scars on hands. Not soft hands. Not hands of thief. Hands of worker." Ezra looked down at his palms, chapped, weathered, lined with fence cuts, horse rope burns, old calluses. "She say you have photo. Woman. Dead woman. Wife. She say you no loss." Ezra blinked. The photograph on his table. His wife. He hadn't realized Ayanna had seen it. Takakota took a breath, then turned back to the chief and spoke quickly in Apache. The chief nodded slowly, then addressed the gathered warriors in a booming voice. Some looked stunned, others angry, but none interrupted. When the chief turned back to Ezra, his tone had changed. "Takakota accepts, but he asks something more. Not your word. Not your silence." Ezra frowned. "What then?" The chief's gaze burned like sunlight. "He wants proof. Of honor. Proof with blood." Ezra's heart dropped. "What kind of proof?" The chief looked past him to the horizon. "There are others," he said. "Men who did this to my daughter. Slavers. Predators. Waiting now. Near Snake Creek." Ezra's throat tightened. "And he wants me to ride with you?" "To hunt them," the chief said. "To stop them. To show that your mercy has steel behind it." Ezra looked out at the desert, at the hundreds of eyes on him, at Ayanna, quiet beside him, watching with the same calm courage she'd shown since the night before. And he knew, this wasn't about surviving anymore. This was about choosing. Ezra didn't answer right away. He stood beneath the wide, burning sky, his heart thudding against his ribs like a war drum. Around him, the circle of Apache warriors waited silent, still, but not patient. The offer had been made. No, not an offer. A test. A line drawn in the dust, daring him to step across. To stay meant safety, or at least the illusion of it. He could go back to tending his land, mending fences, burying himself in solitude and routine. But he'd seen Ayanna's scars. He'd heard her voice tremble when she said the word father. He'd looked into Takakota's eyes and felt the unspoken challenge there. "Will you ride with us? Not for glory, not for vengeance, but because it's right?" Ezra lowered his rifle. "I'll go," he said. "I'll ride with you." No one cheered. The chief simply nodded. Once, like that was the only answer he'd expected. Takakota stepped forward and extended his hand. His grip was firm, calloused, rough like Ezra's own. When he spoke, his voice was solemn. "You ride as Apache brother now. We protect you. You protect us. Even unto death." Ezra nodded. "Even unto death." The moment passed like the wind cutting through the cliffs. Then the camp moved. Orders flew in Apache. Horses were brought forward. Warriors mounted up in a rhythm that was quiet and efficient. No shouting, no wasted motion. These men had fought together for years. They didn't need speeches or plans carved in stone. They just needed a target. Snake Creek. As Ezra mounted the spare horse they brought him, Ayanna appeared at his side. Her face was stronger now, color returning to her cheeks. She held something in her hands, a leather strap, braided with a single carved bone bead. She tied it around Ezra's wrist. "For luck," she said softly. Ezra looked at it, then at her. "Thank you." Ayanna hesitated. Then, in halting English, "You save me. Now we save others." He nodded once and they rode. The desert passed beneath them like a living, breathing thing. They traveled in silence. No chatter, no noise but the horses and wind. The Apache moved like shadows, gliding through canyons, across rocky ridges, and through dry washes with uncanny ease. Ezra had thought himself a man of the land, but riding with them made him feel like a child lost in a maze of sand and stone. The sun rose higher, scorching, then dipped westward as the day stretched long. Just before dusk, they crested a ridge overlooking a narrow clearing beside Snake Creek. That's when Ezra saw it. The slavers' camp. From a distance, it looked ordinary. Just a handful of wagons, a few tents, men huddled around fires. But through his borrowed spyglass, the truth leapt into focus. Cages. Iron cages welded into the beds of wagons. And inside, people. Ezra's gut twisted. At least a dozen captives. Women. Children. Some Mexican, some Apache. Even a few white faces, girls no older than Ayanna. All with the hollow, haunted look of souls already halfway gone. Beside him, Chief Nal Nish appeared like smoke. 15 guards, he said. Heavily armed. But not alert. They think no one dares stop them. Takakota joined them, crouching low. He laid out the plan in crisp, quiet tones. "We split. Half circle north. Make noise. Draw fire. The rest, we free cages from behind." Ezra studied the layout. "I'll go with the rescue team," he said. "Someone needs to open those cages fast." Takakota looked at him with something close to respect. "Good. You think of others." The sun kissed the horizon. Shadows stretched long. Then came the signal. A hawk's cry. Warriors to the north screamed their battle calls. Gunshots cracked. The slavers bolted to meet the threat. Just as planned. Ezra and the rescue team raced down the backside of the ridge. They hit the cages hard and fast. The first was locked tight. Ezra blasted it open with the butt of his rifle. 3 young girls shrieked at the noise, but one recognized Ayanna and ran into her arms. More warriors fanned out, breaking locks, lifting captives from the wagons like fallen children from a burning house. Then gunfire roared behind them. Some slavers had realized the trap. Ezra spun, rifle raised. 3 armed men were charging. He fired once, dropped one. The other 2 kept coming. Then Takakota appeared like thunder, his rifle barking twice. Both men fell hard. "Go!" he shouted. "Get them to safety." Ezra grabbed a woman who could barely walk, her face bruised, one eye swollen shut. He carried her over his shoulder, covering her with his own coat. Bullets hissed around them. Ayanna helped a crying boy limp across the clearing. Behind them, warriors fought like men possessed, fury and purpose in every step. 10 minutes. That's all it took. 10 minutes to turn a den of nightmares into a field of the dead. 15 slavers lay sprawled across the dust. 23 captives, battered but alive, huddled near the rocks, drinking water and shaking from shock. Ezra stood among them, blood on his sleeve, a shallow graze on his arm, his chest heaving. The chief approached. "You fought well," he said. "Like Apache." Ezra didn't answer. He was staring at the faces of the rescued. One little girl clutched his leg and wouldn't let go. "These people," Ezra whispered, "they have families. They were supposed to disappear. Like ghosts." Chief Nal Nish nodded. "But now they will be seen again. Because you rode with us." Takakota approached, no longer scowling. "You are brother now," he said, placing a hand on Ezra's shoulder. "Not white man, just brother." Ezra looked at the horizon. The sun was gone, but inside, something had been lit. Something that would not go out. 3 days later, Ezra sat on the front porch of his ranch. The wind moved gently across the plains, rustling the dry grasses like whispered voices of the past. The desert sky above was painted in hues of crimson and gold, the sun dipping slowly behind the mesa like a curtain falling on the last act of a long, hard play. His rifle leaned against the wall beside him, untouched. His boots, still caked with dust and blood, sat heavy on the wooden floorboards. And on the small table next to his chair, next to a worn photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a sun-hat smile, lay a simple bracelet, Apache leather, strung with carved bone and a single red bead. Ayanna had left it there without a word. Ezra stared at it like it meant everything. Because it did. He had returned home. But he was not the man who left. The freed captives had all made it to safety. Some were taken in by Apache families. Others escorted back to distant settlements where someone, somewhere, still prayed for them every night. The slaver camp had been burned to the ground, its cages turned to ash. What those men had built with cruelty, the Apache had erased with fire and justice. Ezra had ridden at the front of the group on the way back. Not because he asked to, because they let him, because he'd earned it. In those final miles, no one said much. The warriors rode in silence, the kind that only comes after blood has been spilled and honor has been restored. Ayanna rode beside her brother, her face lifted to the wind, scars fading but never gone. When they reached his ranch, the war party stopped. Chief Nal Nish dismounted and walked with Ezra to the fence where they'd first met. He extended his hand. "You rode with us," the chief said. "You protected what was not yours. You gave more than we asked. My people will not forget." Ezra clasped his hand. "Neither will I." Takakota approached last. He held out a knife, its handle carved with an eagle's wing. "This is symbol," he said, "of warrior who has seen truth and chosen fight. You keep it. You are not just ally. You are story." Ezra nodded, too full to speak. And then they left, like mist retreating into the rocks, gone as swiftly as they came. Now the quiet was different. Not the silence of grief, not the emptiness of loneliness, but a silence earned. Ezra didn't know what came next. He didn't know if more men would come to do evil, if the land would ever truly know peace, if he himself would ride again into danger. But he knew this. He would not look away again. He would not be the man who saw injustice and chose comfort. He would not let fear speak louder than his conscience. Somewhere out there, evil still worked behind curtains and closed wagons. But now he had seen the faces of those it tried to break. And he had heard the sound of freedom. Not a gunshot, not a battle cry, but a little girl, once locked in a cage, laughing in the back of a wagon as the sun rose behind her. That was worth more than any safety the world could offer. Inside his cabin, Ezra lit the lamp and poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a tin cup. He raised it, not in celebration but remembrance. "To those who never came home," he said quietly. Then he looked at the bracelet one more time. He picked it up, ran his thumb across the bead, and tied it onto his wrist. Not for luck, but for truth, for courage, for the man he'd finally chosen to become.